Cabinet, but we are joined by two members of the Public Accounts Committee, Sinn Féin Deputy Leader Mary Lou MacDonald and Mark MacSharry of Fianna Fáil. Mary Lou MacDonald, whatever investigation is conducted into this, whether it's by the Public Accounts Committee, whether it's by a Commission of Inquiry, whatever, so there has to be a cross-border dimension to it at some level, doesn't there? So is the idea Katie was talking about, is that a runner, do you think?
Well, I think just bear in mind that the committee in the North has held substantial hearings, has reported already, and as your report reflected, it was very, very critical of Michael Noonan for his failure to act at a time where he should have acted to protect the taxpayers' interests. So the testimony to that committee is on the record. Of course, anybody can draw on that. It's now a public document. I think undoubtedly there has to be cooperation north to south on these matters, because as this story has played out, and I disagree fundamentally with Alan Kelly when he said in your clip that, you know, the latest BBC programme changed everything. Actually, it didn't. There had been a previous broadcast by the BBC. There had been reporting by many, many media outlets, including RTE. There had been all sorts of matters in the public domain. And what the recent revelations do is add, if you like, to the weight of argument for a commission of inquiry. And I think that the case is now unanswerable. I think if we are to truly say the taxpayers' interests are to be protected and acknowledged, then there is no other route other than an inquiry. The CNAG report, of course, is important. I have no doubt that the office has carried out a very thorough and very extensive examination, but it is limited to certain matters, and it will not have the scope to get at governance issues, issues around fixers' fees, corrupted practices and so on.
How is a commission or whatever based in this jurisdiction going to be able to inquire into stuff that happened in Belfast?
Well, the activities happened in Belfast, but the decision-making comes right back to Dublin.
Yes, so you can look into the decision-making, but you can't look into the other aspects.
NAMA is a creature and a creation initially of Fianna Fáil, but of governments here in Dublin. Frank Daly, head of NAMA, is the head of all of NAMA, including when they had their Northern Advisory Committee. It's not as though this thing in faraway Belfast was some alien entity. It's very much part and parcel of NAMA. And ultimately, bear in mind, it's the taxpayers in this jurisdiction who pick up the tab.
You're on the hook for it. Mark MacSharry, in October of last year, Fianna Fáil were in favour of a commission of investigation. In June, you were against it, and now you're in favour of it again. Is this your final answer?
No, that's not the case. First of all, on a personal level, I've been looking for a commission of investigation for some time. What we said, and Mick Wallace indeed knows that in advance of the debate in June, that we said that we were concerned about the timing. As you know, there were 2 arrests that day in Belfast, plus we had the Comptroller and Auditor General's report. So what we had determined was that the timing was incorrect. Now, since then, and my own contribution indeed to that particular debate, if you care to check the record, said at the end that we needed to keep this under review on the basis that there may be other revelations, and so there has.
And Michael McGrath said in that debate, our honest assessment is that a commission of investigation established in the Republic in the heat of an accelerating criminal investigation in the North would most likely run into the sand quickly. The decision to establish one should not be made until the criminal investigation has been completed.
Well, as we've seen from the banking inquiry in particular, it's possible to have investigations of that nature while there are criminal investigations going on. And the banking inquiry worked very well. Indeed, there are other examples in terms of some of the child abuse inquiries where specific modules can be suspended while we're waiting for criminal investigations to conclude. As it happens, waiting for the Comptroller and Auditor General's report, if we believe what's been rumoured to be in it, that it could have cost hundreds of millions to the Irish taxpayer, then it was the correct thing to wait until it's ready so that we have a full picture. What's critically important now when the party leaders do meet is that whatever commission of inquiry in its terms of reference that are agreed is given sufficient scope that should additional revelations emerge on either side of the border, that commission of inquiry will have the scope to broaden itself to include those. So we don't have mistakes of the past like we saw with the IBRC delay of 6 months and indeed others.
But would it not make more sense, as your party colleague suggested in June, to wait until the criminal investigation is finished and then you'll have a fuller idea of what you're looking at?
As I've said, that's not required, and I gave the example of the banking inquiry, but if I could say...
But the banking inquiry was a good example of parliamentary inquiry into a difficult and convoluted subject. Could the PAC not do the same on this?
The PAC will certainly undertake its work in terms of the Comptroller Auditor General, and that's its remit, and we're going to continue, as you know, with Sean Fleming's proposals on that, and Mary Lou has mentioned the fact that we intend to try to the fullest extent possible to cooperate with our counterparts in Northern Ireland to maximise the output. But can I make one point, and you had it in your promo earlier, where Jack Horgan-Jones had mentioned that there are questions to answer here by Minister Noonan and the Taoiseach in particular, where last week...
And is that not better done in an open forum?
We had the Taoiseach. Well, I think you can take it for granted that those questions will be levelled at Minister Noonan. However, the timing, and this is a very, very important point, the timing that Minister Noonan brought forward to close down NAMA instead of allowing it to work out to maximise the return to the taxpayer from 2020 back to the rushed situation now is very, very curious. And I think the reticence of the Taoiseach today in terms of the inquiry that's necessary is very much points towards questions that Minister Noonan needs to answer.
OK, Mary Lou McDonald, leaving Mr Cushnan and his activities aside for just 1 second, when you look at the situation in the north, wasn't it perfectly logical for the executive to want to have all this property sold as quickly as possible to get the property market, which is quite a small market in the north, moving again?
The logic, the logic of the position from start to finish is that assets were to be managed, held and disposed of with one objective in mind, and that objective was to protect the taxpayer, not to give a way out to developers, certainly not to get into footsie with big firms, big international firms, such as those that might bid in these circumstances, certainly not to give an opportunity to people perhaps to engage in unethical and perhaps corrupt practices. But I tell you what I find curious about all of this, and listening to Mark this evening, it strikes me, if you take a step back and look at what's happened, the seriousness of the allegations have been well rehearsed and well understood for quite some time now. You've got investigations in the north, you have investigations in the United States of America, and only at the last minute, the 11th hour, dragged kicking and screaming, do you have the political establishment in this state, ironically in the jurisdiction where the taxpayers pick up the tab, to actually face the fact that we now need a fully comprehensive investigation. And I would be very critical of Michael Noonan. I think he messed up spectacularly. I think he was negligent. But I would equally question the bona fides of Fianna Fáil on this matter. I think you have equivocated, you've kicked for touch, and only when you are left with no other option. Now, I'm glad that you've come to that position. The CNAG can do so much. The PAC, we will do our work, we will do it diligently, and we will do it in full transparency. But there are issues that require the full scope and breadth of a commission of investigation. In the absence of that, we're really not going to get to the nub of what was going on around Project Eagle and other large property portfolios.
Doesn't this all go back to the original sin of the establishment of NAM in the first place?
No, I wouldn't think so. And indeed, as finance spokesman in the Senate at the time, I think in my concluding remarks after some 60 hours, I said it may well be the case that we require, as things go forward, a NAMA number 2 or number 3 bill. And that option would have been open as revelations became clear to Minister Noonan and the last government under the leadership of the Taoiseach to set up more statutory oversight, as was done, for example, with the banking inquiry, where us that were members of the banking inquiry were giving access to documents that were protected under Article 33AK of the Central Bank Act. Something like that, for example, could have been done. That government didn't do that, and I think we're reaping the rewards, for want of a better expression, of that today.
OK, Mark MacSharry, Mary Lou McDonald, thank you both.